About 6 weeks later, Peter and Sarah sorted through moving boxes placed in various rooms around the house. The two of them were in the kitchen unpacking some of the boxes. "Do you want this blender on the counter?" Peter asked as he lifted it out of the box while removing the newspaper. "Yeah, just put it anywhere on the counter for now. I can find a spot for it later," Sarah replied, placing a stack of dishes into a cupboard above the counter. After the dishes were in place, Sarah paused and said, "Wow, this will be our first night in our new house. I'm still amazed that we could afford this place, but I'm definitely not complaining." Peter stopped unpacking and said, "It'll be very nice having our own place, and not just blowing the money on rent every month. I'm very happy here, Sarah," Peter added while he walked over to Sarah. "I am as well, at least so far," Sarah said, reaching her arms out to embrace Peter. "Still have that wait and see attitude, huh?" Peter said with a slight smile as they embraced. "I'm sorry, but this is just not the type of town I'm used to living in yet." "I really do like it so far though," Sarah said, trying to reassure him as she gazed into his eyes. "Well, thank you again for giving it a try. I know I will be more at ease here, and hopefully that'll make it better for you as well," Peter said. "I have noticed you are more relaxed already, and it definitely helps," Sarah replied. After holding each other for a while longer, Sarah asked, "You start your job Monday like I do, correct?" "Yep, they are having me start about 8:45 Monday morning." "When do you start your job?" he asked. "They want me there a little after 8. That means I can probably be the one to park in the driveway, since I'll be leaving first," she replied. "Well, as long as you are okay with parking it outside," he sighed a moment then continued, "hopefully, I'll be successful here. I know I grew up in a small town, but I haven't tried to sell houses in one." "Oh, you'll do fine, Peter. It can't be that different from Farmington. The procedures should be similar, and you are always good with people," she said to reassure him. He sighed and then said, "I'm sure you are right. It's just those last-minute nerves or something that has me a bit worried, I guess. Now that we have this house to pay for and those kinds of things, like I said, you will be fine," she said, pulling him closer. After embracing for a minute or so, Peter offered, "I can go move the cars if you would like." "Okay, I'll stay in here and continue the unpacking fun," she said with a small smile. As Peter stepped away from her, he said, "I'll make it quick. I don't want to miss out, you know." She laughed as he headed down the hall toward the front door. When he reached the front door, he pulled it open to the usual squeaking. He walked out to the porch and down the steps. Both of their cars were parked in the street. His car was parked in front of hers. He decided to move his first to the garage, then her car into the driveway. As he made his way along the sidewalk toward his car, he saw an older man next door working in his yard. Peter decided to greet him, so he waved and said, "Hi, I'm Peter Corbin. My wife Sarah and I are just moving into this house." The older man did not smile, but stopped what he was doing and stood up to greet him. When Peter reached close to him, he extended his hand to shake Peter's hand. As he did, he said, "Name's Vernon Kramer. I hope they told you the house is cursed before you bought it." As Peter shook Vernon's hand, he was stunned for a moment. His jaw dropped and his hand-shaking movement slowed. He finally was able to recover enough to slowly ask, "Listen, I know the previous owner disappeared along with her husband, but why does that make this house cursed?" "You already knew about that and you still wanted the place," Vernon said. He then added, "That's not the whole story." Peter was not sure how to react. Since Vernon sensed this, he said, "Well, Peter, best of luck to you both in your new house. Good to meet you." "Nice to meet you too, Vernon," Peter replied slowly. Vernon then released Peter's hand and turned around to return to his yard work. Peter stood on the sidewalk still astonished for a moment. He shook his head and continued on toward his car. While inside the car, prior to starting it, he paused for a moment. He decided not to tell Sarah about Vernon's warning. Probably just telling her that he met Vernon and that he was concerned for them in the house would be enough. The part about there being more to the story was something he wanted to avoid for the time being. He then sighed and twisted the key to start the car. Later that evening, after Peter and Sarah were in bed sleeping, Peter was stirred awake by Sarah. "Honey, I think I hear voices," she whispered to him. "Huh," he said before having a chance to open his eyes. "I said, I think I hear voices," she repeated nervously. "Voices? Are they in the house?" Peter asked, sitting up partially. "I'm not sure, but could you check?" she asked. "I suppose I could look around a bit," Peter replied as he swung his feet out of the bed onto the floor. He paused a moment at the edge of the bed. Having a chance to listen, he could hear some faint voices, but he was unable to understand what they were saying. He closed his eyes for a moment to listen closely to get some idea of where they were from. After a moment, he did agree that the voices at least appeared to be coming from within the house. He stood up and walked to the open front window. Through the branches of one of the trees he could see a couple walking by on the sidewalk. Relieved that no one was in the house, he crossed the floor back to the bed. Sarah was looking at him as he reached the bedside. Sarah nervously asked him, "Did you see anything yet?" "Yes, it was just a couple walking by on the sidewalk." "With the window open you are going to hear things like that occasionally," Peter replied. Sarah sighed, relieved that the voices did not come from within the house. "Thanks, sweetie, I do appreciate you checking. You know, since it's a bit cooler now, maybe you could shut the window," she suggested. Peter sighed and then agreed, "Sure. That'll cut out some of the outside noises as well." "Thanks, it really did sound like the voices were coming from inside though," she said laying back down on her pillow. "Yeah, I was fooled at first too," Peter replied walking back to the window to push the double-hung window shut. "Maybe the voices were echoing off the walls or something," Peter suggested. "Yeah, maybe it was something like that," Sarah replied trying to reassure herself that the voices did not come from inside the house. He returned back to his side of the bed and got back in. In a few minutes he was asleep again. Later that night, he was again stirred awake by Sarah tapping on his arm. "Sweetie, sorry to wake you again, but I still hear voices," she whispered. "Oh, man," he said slowly as he propped himself up in the bed towards her. "So you are hearing voices again?" he asked after a yawn. "Yeah, though this is different than the last time. It almost sounds like a woman who is in trouble and asking for help," she whispered nervously. A bit frustrated, but wanting to help, he offered, "Okay, I'll listen for a while and see if I can hear anything. If I do hear something, I'll look around." "Sure, just listen." "Thanks, sweetie," she replied, relieved a bit. He swung his legs off the side of the bed again. After taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes again to listen. He sat and waited for several minutes, but heard nothing. "Sorry, Sarah, but I have not heard any voices yet," Peter said. Disappointed, but understanding, she replied, "Well, thanks for trying, sweetie. I know I did hear something, though." "I don't doubt it, honey, I just didn't hear anything." "I know I usually sleep more soundly than you, too," Peter said. "I know, but I did hear a woman. She was moaning a bit and I could make out something like, 'Help me, and let me out,' or something like that," she said. A bit unnerved, Peter asked, "You could make out that much from the voices?" "Yes, I listened to it for a while before I woke you up. So I had a chance to pay attention to what I was hearing. It was actually a bit louder in the bathroom too," she replied. "You were in the bathroom? I must really have been in a deep sleep," Peter said. "Yeah, you were snoring a bit again too, but not too bad at least," Sarah said. "Well, I'll try to see if I can hear anything too. Like I said, I do believe you," he said, to try to reassure her. "Thanks, sweetie, your support does help," she replied. "Just try to get back to sleep." We need to get more sleep so we can unpack more things in the morning, he said. I know, sweetie. I am trying to sleep. It's just hard since I'm hearing things. Thanks again, she said as she rolled over and closed her eyes. Good night, he said as he moved his legs back into the bed and pulled the covers over himself. Good night, sweetie, she replied. About 8:45 Monday morning, Peter drove his car into the parking lot by the realty office. He got out after finding a spot near the back, then walked around to the front of the office, holding a box containing some items for his desk. After he freed his hand from the box to reach the front door handle, he found it to be locked. He knocked on the glass. He could see Carl approaching the door. Carl twisted the lock and pulled it open from the inside. Good morning, Peter, Carl said, as the bell above the door rang. Good morning to you too, Carl, Peter replied with a smile. Come on in. I see that you brought some things for your desk. Your desk should be ready for you to move in, Carl said, holding the door for Peter to pass by. After Peter was inside, Carl closed the door behind him and relocked it. Peter carried the box to the desk behind Carl's desk and set it on top beside the computer. How is the new house working out for you? Carl asked. Well, we're enjoying it so far. We have unpacked several boxes, and it's starting to look somewhat organized at least, Peter replied. Any problems with the house so far? Carl asked. Peter hesitated for a moment then replied, well, nothing is really wrong. The only thing is that Sarah has been hearing strange sounds at night. Carl was a bit puzzled. He then asked, strange sounds, like what? Peter stared downward for a moment, and then back at Carl. After a sigh, he replied, she said she is hearing voices. I guess to her it sounds like they are asking for help and to be let out. How about you? Have you heard these same voices? Carl asked curiously. Other than some people walking by outside, no, I haven't. I've even tried to listen specifically for them, but so far nothing. I do believe that she is hearing something, but I have no idea what's going on yet. I'm a heavy sleeper though, so there could be things happening, and I just don't hear it, Peter replied. Do you think it could be anything having to do with the history of the house, Peter? Carl asked. I suppose moving into a new house, and her knowing the history may be putting some stress on Sarah. Maybe that could be causing some reaction like this. I just hope it ends soon. I want her to be happy in the house, Peter replied. Well, I sure want the two of you to be very happy in the house. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help, Peter, Carl offered. Thanks, Carl, I can't think of anything now, but if I do I'll let you know, Peter replied. Carl suggested, why don't you get situated in the desk, and then let me know when you are ready to go over some things. Sounds good, Carl. I'll let you know when I'm ready, Peter said, as he walked behind the desk. He then removed the top of the box, reached inside, and pulled out a stapler. About 10 minutes later, Peter cleared his throat, and said, Hey Carl, I think I have most of my stuff unpacked now. You said that you had some things to go over. Carl turned around from his desk chair, and he replied, Oh yes, Peter, just a few things to discuss. Carl reached back to retrieve some papers on his desk. After turning around again to face Peter, he said, Well, to start, I have 3 new listings that I can let you have. These just came in last week, and they need to be followed up with the usual items, like getting appraisals, ads into the paper, and other places. Do you have a contact for local appraisers? Peter asked. Oh yes, let me write the name down for you, Carl said, turning back to his desk to find a piece of paper. He picked up a pen and wrote down the name and number on the paper. After turning around, he handed the paper across the desk to Peter. She's local and we have an account with her, so you just give her a call to make the appointments for each of the houses, Carl said. Simple enough, I'll give her a call. Thanks, Carl. Oh, I'll likely ask about the ad contacts once I get this taken care of, Peter replied. Sure, just let me know when you are ready, Carl said. Okay, Peter said as he started reviewing the papers with the new listing information to get the background information needed for the appraiser. After Peter contacted the appraiser and made appointments with her for the 3 houses, he studied the listings a bit further. While he was doing this, Carl turned around from his desk and asked, "Did you get a hold of Colleen for the appraisals?" "Sure did. I made appointments to meet her at the houses Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday." "You know, 1 appointment for each house." "Colleen does sound very nice, by the way. She has been very pleasant to work with over the years, though she should be able to handle the appraisals by herself," Carl replied. "Oh, I just wanted to work with her a few times to get the feel for the housing market around here," Peter said. "Well, she'll help you out with that, so that is a good idea," Carl agreed, as he started to turn back to his desk. After swinging back around again, Carl offered, "Oh Peter, I almost forgot something. My wife, Mary, and I would like you and Sarah to come to our house this Friday for a little get-together." "Oh really? That would be very nice of you too," Peter commented. "Yeah, I wanted to invite some of the local people we work with here so that you can get to know them better. It'll be after dinner, since I'm inviting more people than we really have space for a dinner. We'll have plenty of hors d'oeuvres though, so you probably can just have a light dinner before you come over," Carl explained. "Hey, that would be nice to meet people socially that I'll be working with around here." "Who are you planning on inviting?" Peter asked. "We don't have the whole list made yet, but it'll people from the local bank, Colleen, Phyllis, and some others," Carl answers. "Do you think they'll all be able to come?" Peter asked. "Well Peter, remember Wharton is a small town with not as much to do every night as the bigger cities. So it's usually easier to get people to attend things," Carl reminded Peter. "Good point. We'll have to remember when we have parties, too," Peter agreed. "Well, we don't have any plans for Friday evening, so we should be able to make it. Of course I'll check with Sarah too." "What time would you like us there?" Peter asked. "About 7:30 or so would be fine." "Oh, I'll have to make you a martini or 2. Not to brag, but I think they rival the one you had at the Chiltern River Inn," Carl said. "The martinis sound great. I won't be late knowing those are waiting for me," Peter replied. Carl laughed and said, "Okay, I'll look forward to it. Just let me know if you can't make it for any reason. I can't imagine a problem, but if there is anything, I'll let you know very soon." "Thanks so much, Carl," Peter said. "No problem, Peter. It'll be good for everyone to get to know you and for you to get to know them. I'm just trying to make this change as smooth as I can for you," Carl said. "It definitely will help. Thanks again," Peter replied. "Sure," Carl said, as he turned back to his desk. Later that day, Peter and Sarah were eating dinner at home. Remembering the party on Friday, Peter held his fork in his hand and finished chewing the salad greens in his mouth. After swallowing, he said, "Sarah, Carl and his wife, Mary, have invited us to their house Friday evening for, well, basically a party. Do you have anything scheduled that evening?" "No, I don't have plans with the people I'm working with for Friday." "That sounds like fun. Will it just be Carl and Mary?" Sarah asked. "No, not just them. Carl plans on inviting several people associated with the local real estate business. I guess he'll be inviting people and their spouses from the bank mortgage department, at least one appraiser, and Phyllis, the other realtor you met after lunch when we visited," Peter replied. "Wow, that does sound worthwhile. It'll give you a chance to meet people you need to know from town for the business, and we get to meet their spouses as well," Sarah commented. "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it," Peter agreed. "Did Carl say when it'll start?" Sarah asked. "He said about 7:30. Oh, and it'll be after dinner, since he's inviting too many to have everyone sit down for dinner. He suggested we just eat light before we go," Peter replied. "That would work." "Hey, maybe we could eat a big lunch instead," Sarah suggested. How about trying that Chiltern River Inn again? Peter followed up. Sounds good to me. Though I likely will have to make it a late lunch. The store is usually busier during the lunch hour, relatively speaking for a small town, you know, Sarah replied. Yeah, we probably could meet there somewhere around 1 or 1:30. I suspect the normal lunch hours may have some walk-in traffic at the real estate office as well, Peter agreed. Sounds like a good time. So how was your first day today? Sarah asked. It went well. Carl started me off with 3 new houses which need to be listed. I have to get them appraised, so I can get a starting price to get them advertised, Peter answered. 3 houses right off the bat. That should keep you busy, Sarah commented. Well, at least the pace is a bit slower here. Carl gave me a contact for the appraiser and I set up appointments for each house later this week, Peter tells her. Sounds like a good start, she replied. By the way, how was your day? Peter asked. Oh, it went well too. Definitely not as busy as I was used to in the Farmington store, and so far that is nice, she replied. How are the people in the store? Peter asked. So far they have treated me well. It's just one day, but nothing to complain about yet, Sarah replied. Well, that's good at least, Peter added. They then continued to finish their dinner. Later that evening before bed, Peter was brushing his teeth. He turned on the separate cold water faucet handle to rinse his brush. The handle squeaked slightly as it turned. As the water started cascading out of the faucet, a deep vibrating moan could be heard. Peter reached to the handle and could feel it vibrating. To him, it appeared as the whole sink was vibrating as well. It then faded gradually, until it was inaudible. From the bedroom, Sarah asked Peter, what was that noise? Staring at the sink, he replied, the sink was making a funny noise. It's probably just the old pipes or something. That did sound strange. I hope it's something simple like that, she replied. Like Carl said, this place will have plenty of strange sounds, Peter reminded her. I know, but it is a bit unnerving to me sometimes, Sarah added. Peter finished rinsing his brush, and then he prepared for bed. 11. The alarm went off in the morning. Peter could hear Sarah rustling. She sat up on the edge of the bed as Peter watched her. She almost seemed to be falling back to sleep while sitting on the edge. Are you okay, Sarah? Peter asked, as he propped his head up slightly. Oh, I'm just very tired, sweetie, she mumbled. Did you have trouble sleeping or something? Peter asked. I kept hearing voices again last night, and I just couldn't sleep, she replied slowly. Are you going to be well enough to go to work? Peter asked. Yeah, I just need a shower and some strong coffee before I go. I just can't keep this up night after night, Sarah replied. Well, you can wake me up tonight if you hear something again. I want to help you with this, you know, he offered. Thanks, Peter, that should help. At least if you cannot find anything, then maybe I could just try to ignore it, Sarah replied, starting to stand up from the bed. In the evening, the sun had gone down, and the sky was quickly losing color as it changed to night. Peter and Sarah were about finished with dinner. Sarah told Peter, you know, one thing I would like to do around here is to go through prior owners' things in the office. Our stuff is mostly still in boxes, and I would like to find some room for some of it. The chandelier above their table dimmed slightly for a moment, and then it returned to the normal brightness. They both stared at it for a moment, but nothing else happened. Did you want me to help sorting? Peter offered, trying to ignore what happened with the light. No, I should be okay by myself. I may even do some this evening, if that's okay with you, she asked, starting to stand up from the table. Remember, Carl said there may be some hidden treasures in the house, Peter reminds her. I know that. That's why I want to sort through things carefully rather than just dump it out, she said as she reached for her plate. After placing her silverware on the plate, she walked toward the sink. The lights in the room went out. Sarah said, "Damn it." There was a loud crash in the room. "Are you okay, Sarah?" Peter called out into the darkened room. "I'm fine so far. It just surprised me, and I dropped the plate and silverware," she replied. "Just stay there for a moment so you don't run into anything," Peter suggested. "I'm starting to be able to make things out now. It's not totally dark out yet, at least, so the window light is helping me see a bit," she replied. "Yeah, I can see some," Peter started saying as the lights suddenly turned back on. "The lights are back on. Here, let me help clean up the broken plate," Peter offered, heading to the cabinet under the sink for the dustpan and small broom. Later, as Peter and Sarah were preparing to get into bed, Peter asked, "Well, how is the office sorting going so far?" "Oh, there's a lot of old stuff in there. There may even be some stuff from an owner before the one that disappeared," Sarah replied, pulling the covers aside to make room to get in bed. "There's stuff that old in there. Guess no one ever bothered sorting through it much," Peter replied as he also pulled the covers back on his side of the bed. As he slid his feet under the covers, he said, "Well, just remember, if you hear the voices tonight, you can wake me up. Okay, I will do that, but maybe not every time." "At least one of us should get some sleep," she replied, also pulling her feet into the bed. He turned off his bedside light first and then Sarah switched off hers. Peter could feel Sarah gently tapping on his arm. After slowly opening his eyes, he rolled over and asked, "Are you okay?" "Peter, I'm hearing some voices again," she replied. "Okay, I'll see if I can hear anything," he said, rotating his body and then dropping his legs onto the floor. Sitting up on the edge of the bed, he closed his eyes and listened. Still groggy, it took him a moment to concentrate on the ambient sounds. The house was almost too quiet. He opened his eyes and turned around to let Sarah know that he could not hear anything. A fairly loud gasping sound came from somewhere downstairs. It almost sounded as if it could have been human. "I did hear that." "Is that anything like what you have been hearing?" he whispered to her. "I have heard a few things like that, but some actually sound like words or phrases too," she replied. "Let me listen again a while longer," Peter said. "Okay, I'm not going anywhere," Sarah replied. Peter again closed his eyes as he remained on the edge of the bed. He concentrated for perhaps 10 minutes more, but did not hear anything else. "Well, I haven't heard anything since that gasping sound. Did you want me to check around the house for anything?" he asked as he looked back towards Sarah in the bed. "No, I'll be okay. At least you heard something tonight, so not everything is in my mind," she replied. "Sarah, I don't doubt you are hearing things around here. I'm just trying to help," he said. "I know, and thank you," she replied. He brought his feet back into bed, and was soon asleep again. 12 in the office Wednesday, Carl turned around in his desk chair to ask Peter, "Anything else been happening in your house lately?" "Well, yeah, Sarah is still hearing those voices during the night. I actually heard something for the first time last night too. It was almost like a gasping sound." Sarah said she has heard that type of sound before too, but there are also times she can make out words and phrases too, Peter replied. "Okay, Peter, that's starting to sound strange. I'm actually starting to regret selling you to that house. I want you guys to enjoy it. Not be scared of it," Carl said. "Oh, it's fine. Like you said, it's just an old house with strange noises," Peter replied. "Voices go a bit beyond what I would call just strange noises, though," Carl added. "Oh, the power went out last night too, but that probably was something with the power company being overloaded with too many air conditioners," Peter said. "Well, we never lost power last night at our house. I would think we're on the same system too, but I suppose I could be wrong," Carl replied. "Another strange thing, I guess." "Even so, we really like the house," Peter commented. "At least you aren't mad at me yet for it." Do you meet with Colleen today? Carl asked. Yeah, I meet her at 2 this afternoon. She'd even offered to pick me up here and drive to the house, Peter replied. She's nice to work with, isn't she? Carl asked. Definitely sounds that way so far, Peter replied. A few minutes before 2, Peter was working on the computer at his desk. He heard the bells ringing above the front door. A woman walked in. Peter noticed her long light brown hair and her figure silhouetted against the light shining through window. Hello, she called out into the office. Hi Colleen, it's nice to see you again, Carl told her. As she walked up to Carl's desk, Carl said, gesturing his hand toward Peter, Colleen, this is Peter Corbin. Peter stood up from his chair and walked around to greet Colleen. As he reached out his hand, Carl added, Peter, this is Colleen Phillips. It's nice to meet you, Colleen, Peter said as he smiled and shook her hand. It's nice to meet you as well, Peter. So far we have just talked on the phone, Colleen replied. Peter gazed down briefly and noticed that she only has one ring, and it was on her right hand. Well, I'm ready to head off to the first house if you are, Colleen, Peter said, continuing to smile. Okay, let's go. I just parked in the side lot next to the building, Colleen said, smiling at him too. The two of them walked out of the office and headed to Colleen's car. She unlocked it remotely and they got into the car. I take it you know where the first house is? Peter asked as he was about to close the passenger door of the car. Oh yes, I know this town very well, Colleen said as she shut her door too. As Colleen drove the car out of the parking lot into the street, they headed to the left. As they made their way down the street, they approached the store where Sarah worked. Peter actually saw Sarah walking with a woman on the sidewalk coming toward them. They must be heading to lunch, he thought to himself. He waved as the car passed by. Sarah seemed surprised to see him, and just turned her head to look at the car. Who was that? Colleen asked. That was my wife, Sarah, Peter replied. Okay, I was kind of wondering how you would know someone around here already, Colleen said, nodding her head slightly. Hey, are you planning on going to the party at Carl's place this Friday evening? Peter asked. Oh yes, I'll be there. How about you and Sarah? Colleen asked. Well, I think we both pretty much have to be there, since we're the ones who have to meet people at the party, you know, Peter said, smiling at Colleen. Colleen laughed slightly, and they continue on to the house to be appraised.